Peace and salam. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Galaxy 19 satellite. This satellite is there on throughout USA, Canada, and Mexico. Muslim Network is also on Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and of course on our own website, muslimnetwork.tv. Today, I would like to talk to you about something which people call domestic. But that's one of the most horrible violence which we know, domestic violence. But before that, violence is going up in our society. In Denver last Saturday, Lee Keltner, a right-wing agitator, approached a reporter, and reporter's bodyguard is also white. And he struck him and he fired back. And that right-wing activist, agitator, died on the spot. Before that, President Trump celebrated killing of another person whose warrant were not even issued by 4 federal officers, that he was killed in second and resolved the problem. Except all the eyewitnesses are saying that police did not identify itself. They were in simple, plain clothes. Their cars were private cars, and he was shot 30 times by 4 officers in seconds, of course. And there were eyewitnesses all around. What's happening? Violence overall in our society is going up. Division and violence is high. What peacemakers are doing about that? And in the meantime, this crime called domestic continues to happen. Not many people talk about it. And I don't know why they call it domestic. On average, 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner. Wife, husband, a lover, a girlfriend, and a boyfriend in the United States, that is. And during 1 year, those numbers come to 10 million women and men, 10 million people who are physically abused, assaulted, raped, murdered. Why it is called domestic, I don't know. On October 9th, this year, a Muslim woman, Sister Karima, Natasha Price, her other name. She was mother of 5 and a part of the Muslim community for 20 years. She was gunned down by her husband and children's stepfather. And a person who told us is a person I have seen constantly standing up in the Muslim community, raising voice and doing something to take care of poor, hungry, needy, homeless, opening her own house to take care of people. And that's Sister Asma Inge-Hanif. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Sister Asma.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah Khan, brother, for inviting me.
Sister Asma Hannif is an advanced nurse practitioner and the founding leader of a social service organization called Muslimatun Nisa. And we also have with us a content manager of Sound Vision, who has written multiple articles on the topic of domestic violence, Sister Samana Siddiqui.
Thank you for having
me. Welcome to Muslim Network TV. Sister Asma Hannif, first, very sorry to hear about Sister Karima, who was gunned down by no one but her own husband. And community must be in shock because she was part and parcel of the community. It's difficult to talk, but would you mind sharing something about her with us?
Yes, and you're correct. It is difficult to talk about this because something that I have learned through the years over 45 years of doing this work is that we know the truth in the Muslim community about the issue of, as you said, domestic violence. We just choose to ignore it. And we would be doing her a disservice if we didn't and do something like what you're proposing now, speaking about it. Because I refuse to believe, or I'm unable to accept, that no one knew what was going on in this sister's life. And it's something that we as a community fail when someone comes to us and tells us that, that they're having trouble in their marriage, or that they're being abused, or that there's problems. We actually ignore it, and we turn a blind eye. And that's what was happening, with Sister Karima, which is why I say that we failed her, because I wasn't one of the individuals that she was telling this information to, but those whom she was telling it to, they gave her, and this is witness to the fact that Allah has taken her soul, they gave her wrong advice. And one of the worst decisions that we make within the Muslim community is that we tell the person to go back home and we will fix it, or we will work it out, or we will deal with it. And anyone who deals with victims of domestic violence, then you know that the first and cardinal rule is you get the person to safety, and then you try to work it out. You don't send the person back, because in doing so, you basically sign her death certificate, which is actually what has happened, which would happen to Sister Karima, because a person doesn't go from, you burn my dinner to, I'm going to kill you now because of it. There were many signs along the way that, and I say we because I'm a part of the Muslim community, that we ignored, and we failed her.
SubhanAllah. I hope her children are in safe position now.
It's the psychological damage that that will continue with them. Imagine, like from the youngest to the oldest, knowing that this is how, your mother left this, her soul was taken. Her life was taken, in this life by someone who was supposed to be, their, maintainer, their protector, their defender. Imagine living with that as a nightmare. So that's what my concern is for her children, the ability to get counseling. And also statistically, it has been shown that individuals who witness domestic violence, especially as children, have a very high probability that they themselves will become abusers, because it was the norm in their family. And I've noticed that from people who come from other countries, as well as those within this country, that's what happens. And it was because of me recognizing that years ago, when I first started dealing with victims of domestic violence, I thought I was coming forth as a champion. I was going to eradicate domestic violence in the Muslim community, until there was a sister who came and she awakened me one morning at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And she was saying, Asma, I need a Kit Kat. I need a Kit Kat. And I'm like, why? And I'm thinking maybe she was a diabetic. She needed something. And then she had a little son who was 3 years old, and he was kicking on his mother because he wanted a piece of candy. And she was wanting to be able to, give it to him. And it's in this moment that I realized that I cannot eradicate domestic violence. Why? Because the abusers of tomorrow are already born. And the only thing that we can do is provide them a safe place to be and the support, so that they don't have to have the same end result as Sister Karima.
May Allah bless her soul, and may God Almighty help us learn the right lessons. And I hope the community in that area and around the country use this as yet another lesson, considering especially that October is the month of the domestic violence. People learn from that. Samana, I saw reports about divorce going up since pandemic. Do you think the domestic violence is also going up at the same time?
Oh, no question. And statistics from around the world are confirming this. I did a little bit of research about this, and starting from China. So for example, I'll just give you a few examples. In China, in Hubei province, domestic violence reports tripled in February. So this is like about a month after the COVID pandemic started. So COVID has a lot to do with it, but it's not that domestic violence was not there before. It's just that it's exacerbated whatever tensions were already there. So China, in France, domestic violence calls increased by 30%, in Spain, 20%, Paraguay, 35%. In the US, they've gone up as well. And just in Chicago alone, where I live, this was a statistic that I came across. So in March, the first week of March, 383 people called the domestic violence hotline. And by the end of April, it had gone up to 549. And not just the domestic violence hotlines, Chicago Police Department itself reports that calls relating to domestic violence have increased by 12%, starting from the beginning of 2020 until middle of April when lockdowns began, about a month after lockdowns began. So this is a worldwide phenomenon. It's not restricted to any particular group of people or country. This is a social scourge around the world, that women and children who are the primary victims of domestic violence, and men as well to an extent, but primarily women and children. This is something that we need to address in a very, not just, I mean, like you said, Sister Asma, we can't just kind of jump in and solve it. It's a cycle, and it's a cycle that's been going on since time immemorial. So we have to do much better as a community to handle this, to deal with it in a way that will not perpetuate that cycle, or at least, inshallah, God willing, reduce it, so that we have far fewer victims like Sister Karima, and our children get the help they need, so that cycle of violence is not perpetuated.
One of the things very profound, Sister Asma said, was that that 3-year-old kid, and 3 a.m. in the morning, a mother wants, some candy. So the way we are raising children who are high on certain things and have no respect and no etiquette, do you think that is also connected with the increase of violence overall?
I absolutely do, because this particular mother, she was brought to the shelter by the police because her neighbors heard her being beat. You know, they heard, and she was, of course, if someone's beating you to that degree, you're crying out in pain. So the police brought her 3-year-old son, and her 7-year-old daughter, to the shelter. And this was, and when she came, because she couldn't speak English that well, she kept talking about her head. And I didn't know what she meant. And then I later found out is that she had been beaten so bad that her head was bleeding, and there was dried blood on her head. And after a few days of being in the shelter, I was approached by her mother. They wanted to come and visit. They lived in New York, and they wanted to come and visit her. And I'm all excited because, like I said, I'm thinking that this family member, that they're concerned about her. They wanted to come and visit, and because her husband had been taken to court, he was in jail waiting for his court date. And they came and they bought her all, like comforting foods from the country. And what I was disappointed from their visit, they didn't come to comfort her. And I'm going back with what Sister, what Sister just said. They didn't come to comfort her. They came to tell her to drop the charges against her husband so that he wouldn't, be prosecuted. And come to find out that she was actually married to her cousin, which was her father's brother's child. Yeah, right. So, right. And so she was more concerned, that the father was more concerned about protecting, the brother's child than his own daughter. And this was like cultural. And so when you're talking about, cultural, handicap, And what the mother was saying, and I've heard this a lot over the years, is that from where they come from, it's better to be dead than be divorced because of the stigmas that was associated with being divorced. And so now we have this little child who's already learned that this is how you treat women, but then you also have a little girl who's observing this, and she's being taught by example of these two generations before, her mother and grandmother, that this is what women are supposed to tolerate and take. You don't divorce someone because of they're beating you.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with a chaplain and an activist, Asma, and Sound Vision content manager, Samana Siddiqui. We'll be right back after these messages.
My wife, who she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way, and because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, you know, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it, and spread the word, because the wisdom is there, so I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the US.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and we're talking with Asma and Samana. And one of the things I, want to go back to the issue of how we raise children, and what impact does that have on how children behave. I mean, children beating up their parents, where did they learn from? And is it going to make them a better human being? Or, as you're saying, another abuser is born. So children are born the way they are born, but they are raised in a particular way. And formative phases are the early years of their life. So what advice can we give to parents about raising children who are raised not to be abusers?
We do need to change the narrative, and that is and something I do want to make the comment that I find that children who are raised in the United States are less likely to be, even though it may be culturally back home something that's acceptable. What I found especially the college children, students, that was the most encouraging thing about all of this, is that the males were being seeing their mothers being abused. It hurt their heart, and so they were vowing that they didn't want to grow up and be an abusive husband, which was a good thing. So they were going to break from their tradition and be different. And then the young girls, the women, they were, and I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing being in this country, they would say, you know what, I'm not going to tolerate this. So they had to, they felt empowered that this is not how they have to live. I mean, or that they want to live. And that was good. But when I've gone to places, when I've asked to speak about domestic violence, I don't go and just attack the male. Even though he's the abuser in the situation, I don't attack them, because it's what you just said, my dear brother. You know what? He wasn't born an abuser. It's not his fault. He's actualizing what he has been, how he has been raised, because no one comes into the world this way. And that's why the only way to change it is to change the upbringing. And I don't know how to do that, because that would involve, cultural changes, or, and that's the most difficult, because we don't change what we tolerate. And I don't know what can be told to, one male, like the father to the son, that would make them believe or accept that this is okay, because it's nowhere in the Quran. And one of the talks that I even give, I said, when I'm talking to everyone, and again, referencing all the faith traditions, I said, domestic violence is criminal. It's not religious. None of the faith traditions say that it's okay. So I don't know why. I can't even answer the question as to how to not let it be a cultural problem. I don't know how to make it stop. So that's the only thing I knew to do, was to provide a shelter, a safe haven for those Muslim women who were here in this country that needed a place to go.
So we'll come in more detail about that. Samana, is domestic violence, is there evidence of domestic violence being more prevalent in the Muslim community than American society in general?
I have not read enough. I think there have been some studies done. I know Sound Vision, we developed a survey about 10 years ago. But again, these are not scientific in the sense that they're a survey of a small sample of people. And I don't have enough information to say with absolute yes or no. But I do know that there's definitely, this is a worldwide problem, that it's something that is across cultures. Now, the issue of what Sister Asma brought up, why do we tolerate that kind? It starts at the core of disrespect for women, disrespect within. It starts within the home, of course. And I don't think that's something that, I think maybe in American society, because in the last 50 years, there's been, particularly after a second wave feminism, there's been a lot more awareness about women's rights, abuses that have been directed at women throughout history in different cultures. There's more awareness about it and less acceptance for it, perhaps. And because legally speaking, there are more punishments, and also the domain between what's private and public has diminished. So for example, it used to be, and I can say this 20 years ago, even within the Muslim community, domestic violence was considered a private affair. It's between the husband and wife, and nobody should intervene. But alhamdulillah, we've progressed a lot. And mashallah, a lot of imams, I know you've done this, Imam Mujahid, and I know other imams as well, they have been on the front lines of fighting domestic violence. So the issue, I think that there's two things. Number one is education. I think Muslims who are from homes or places, not even places. I wouldn't say that Muslims in America are necessarily better. I just think it's an issue of how you're raised and socialized. I've known families from different backgrounds, and honestly speaking, from on a personal perspective, I can tell you within the same culture, there are differences within the family, within different families, I mean, in how a daughter is treated, how a mother is treated. So I don't know, I personally don't believe in, I'm not saying I don't believe that it makes a difference. What I mean is that there may be slight differences, but it's more because of socialization and what's acceptable. And like you said, Sister Asma, what you tolerate, you don't change. So going back just to that idea and what you were talking about, Imam Mujahid, about raising children, when my oldest one is now 18, and when she was very young, I attended an Islamic parenting workshop at my local masjid. And the first thing, the thing that sticks out to me from that particular workshop was never tolerate disrespect, never, from your children. That doesn't mean that you use your hand, that you spank the child, but it's very important as Muslim parents in specific to never tolerate disrespect. And that's not just disrespect of the child towards the parents, but on a much broader level, disrespect for younger siblings, for older siblings, and vice versa. There should be no tolerance for disrespect through bullying, name calling. These are all things that start within the home. So if, for example, a child, a boy, is thought that it's perfectly okay to pick on your younger sister and call her names and do whatever, he's going to grow up with that, and he's going to internalize that, and it's going to affect how he treats his family in the future. Unless he's, like Sister Asma was saying, he himself realizes that as a college student or when he's older, you know what, I saw the way, maybe not my father and mother, but the way, for example, I saw my older brother pick on my younger sister or my older sister pick on my younger brother. So this kind of disrespect is okay. And that young man will learn that this is not okay. So Islamically, for example, I would bring that discussion up. We talk a lot in the Muslim community about respect for parents in general, which is very important. This is in the Quran, this is part of our tradition, and it's very important. But we need to expand that discussion to include respect. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, he or she is not one of us who does not respect his elders and does not treat the younger ones with kindness. So we kind of have that skew that it's all about the parents, or it's all about the father, it's all about a very hierarchical way of doing it. If we read the seerah and the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that's not how he treated his family at all. So going back to that, I think it's important.
Sister Asma, do you think awareness about domestic violence in the Muslim community is increasing? And what is your advice to imams and mosque leaders?
I wouldn't say that it's increasing. I'm saying that it's, based on the work that I do, that is, we're not making the appropriate changes or safety nets for those whom are victims of domestic violence, which is why I say that I try to, I have to address the solution to domestic violence, as opposed to, I don't think in my lifetime that I would be able to, again, eradicate domestic violence. But something that when I first learned so much about the issue of domestic violence, I went to the imams. I did. I went to the imams, and I only say them as a generic term because I'm not trying to, cast shade on anyone. But I went to the imams, and when I was trying to be able to get the shelter, to establish a shelter for Muslim women victims of domestic violence, and I was being told that, oh, there's no such thing. It's not a part of Islam. There's no Muslim women victims of domestic violence, or you have to, show me who these women are. Which, of course, no one's going to do that, because you realize that you have to maintain their anonymity, and they're trusting me with the information. And then I said, there was one imam that I went to, and then I asked, and I was telling him about it, and he said to me, he said, what did she do to make him beat her? And when I tell this, I said, you know what? That was the nicest thing that any imam said when I was asking the question. They said, Asma, how could that be the nicest thing? I said, because in actuality, he was the only one that admitted she had gotten beaten. All the rest of them that I had spoken to denied that it actually occurred. And And then what the other imams would do is that when they say, you know what, go back home and I will take care of it. And what happens then is that, again, I can say it's like he's written her death certificate, because she's either going to be, you know, hidden away, he's going to go to another city or state, or he's never going to let her out. And yes, I know that there are classes, and I'm not taking anything away from those who are learning about domestic violence. And so they're knowing how to counsel. What I do take issue with, though, is that we are, I won't say that we're denying that it exists, but we're not taking, you know, more proactive approach. Because what I found is that most of the conversations center around domestic violence is not a part of Islam. Oh, that's a given. We understand that. So they will use, so most of the talk will center around that, as opposed to finding, you know, supporting a solution, yes, like Muslimat al-Nisa, for those who are actual victims of domestic violence. Because it's easier for someone to stand up and say, you know, it's not a part of Islam, because you don't have to be culpable for what's happening in your community. But if you support a shelter exclusively for Muslim women victims of domestic violence, now you're having to admit that it exists in the community. And that's the reason why I struggle with getting help and support throughout all of these years, because it's as if I'm making it a fact. But going back to the statistical data, when you were talking about, sister, and that is what we don't realize is that when someone like the police have to come in because they find out that a Muslim woman, someone called about someone being beaten. And if we take the Muslim women to a shelter, if the police or whoever, or the social services individuals, then what we're doing is we're providing the statistical data for those agencies and those organizations to know. If nothing else, Muslimat al-Nisa doesn't do that. So it's like, you know what, I'll hide our shame, or I keep our business so that no one knows, but we're still helping the women. And one of the worst things to have to do is to send our Muslim sisters to those shelters where they're going to take that information and use it against us. So it will make us appear as if it's more prominent in the Muslim community, when it's not. They're just highlighting it more, because they say that, let me just backtrack a little bit. One of the reasons why we even established the shelter as well is that when the Muslim sisters would go to those shelters, they would try to convert them to their faith tradition, which, you know, and they would tell them that you are a part of that religion that says it's okay to beat women. Therefore, if you want us to help you, you have to leave that religion and accept our way of life, because your way of life is what's contributing to your own abuse.
Have you, Sister Asma, have you personally known some people who have been told these things by those shelters?
Yes, my brother. And just so you know, I did not go to school initially to do this work. Everything that I know, I learned as a result of establishing the shelter, living there with the women, and them giving me the information. And I have, and so that's the reason why I'm very particular about whom I talk to, whom I share information, and I'm very protective of the women. So
you're watching Muslim Network TV, and this is Imam Malik Mujahid, and we're talking with Chaplain Asma Hannif and Samana Siddiqui. We'll be right back after these messages.
What was it like when you started this network out, when you started Sound Vision those many years ago?
You know, after 9/11, one lady called me and she says, what is your channel which I can watch? And I say, I'm sorry, we don't have a channel. And you know what she said? She said, then how America will know about you?
SubhanAllah. Anything you want to say to the people who are watching? We had one sister who messaged that she grew up on Sound Vision. What do you say to the people who have been long supporters?
Thank you. Thank you. It is because of you we are able to do all of that. So the generation of Adam's world, you need to take it over for the next generation. And that's my invitation to you. So keep telling everybody where to watch. They can watch it on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, or easy thing, muslimnetwork.tv, or our YouTube channel, or our Facebook channel. And with your help, inshallah, ladies, the one who called me, what channel should I watch Muslims on? Answer is here and now.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Chaplain Asma Hannif and Samana Siddiqui. One of the things which we keep hearing is, you just mentioned some people asking them to go back to their abusers. But we also know through research that victims sometimes return to or stay with abusers with their, independent will. What is that phenomena, and how that contributes to further violence?
So, Hannah, did you want to answer, or you want me to answer? Okay. The reason why, and remember, 45 years gives you a lot of time to be able to discover information. I remember when I first started researching how to best help, Muslim women. And I was in a room with a lot of professionals. And what they would say is that we have to empower the women so they could stand up against these men. We have to empower the women so they would leave. And they were saying this. And I finally had to say something because I'm in the shelter. And I said, excuse me. I said, the information that what you're talking about is not correct. I said, and wanting to empower them. I said, the reason why they stay is because they love him. They love him. I said, they just want him to stop beating them. And the thing about, as Muslim women, as women in general, it's like our hearts. We have very forgiving hearts, which is what helps us to be excellent mothers. We have forgiving hearts. We're very patient. We're very tolerant. And so we're always hopeful that he's going to stop, because that's the cycle. They would beat you and then they would say something wonderful. They would beat you and they would say something wonderful. And you have to, and they don't leave until they come to the realization that that he's not going to. And that may be years. That may be years, or it may never happen at all. And there were even another situation where there was a Muslim sister who was being beaten, and he would beat her and put her out in the street, and and this went on for like over a year. And people called me and they said, Asma, she needs a place to stay. Why don't you take her into the shelter? And so I went and I talked with her sister. She was on the street in the cold with with very few clothing. And I said, come to the shelter. And she says, I can't come. And I said, why not? She says, because she said, I have 2 daughters. She says, if I leave, then he will beat them. And I understood that as a mother, she was willing to make that supreme sacrifice. And I never troubled her again because I understood as a mother what she was doing. So people have, various reasons as to why they stay. And none of it is because they want to continually be abused.
My goodness.
I wanted to add to what you were saying, Sister Asma. I know a number of cases of domestic violence, exactly like you're saying, where the woman she will tolerate abuse. I know one case actually just last year finally ended in divorce after almost 20 years. And what would happen was that the wife was absorbing all the abuse, physical, verbal, emotional, but then the husband began doing that to their children. And that was the last straw. She said, he can do what he wants to me, but nothing to my kids. And that's what pushed her to leave. So a lot of the women, like you're saying, they're in that situation where either they emotionally, sometimes, of course, like you said, it's emotional, but sometimes financial. Also, the stigma around divorce. Yeah. What will happen to my children? They'll be the children of divorce. Nobody will marry them. Women, mothers especially, think long term. So they don't just take a step drastically. And that's why they keep going back and they keep going back, despite whatever happened to them. So I think it's important for people to realize that women are not, it's not just we can get up and leave. That's not how it works. Like you said, there's love involved, there's emotion involved, and there's children involved. And for a mother, children are the thing that drive her to stay in an abusive situation, but they can also be the thing that push her to leave. So giving a woman time, giving her support. And one of the things I was reading about, the CDC actually was saying in situations of domestic violence during the pandemic, make a safe, make kind of a safety plan so that you can get out and don't isolate. Try your best. If you know someone who's being abused, do not keep in touch with them by text if they can't talk. Make sure they don't become isolated, because eventually a woman in that situation, either she will choose to leave or she will do that, get to that step, but she cannot be isolated. That's what leads to her to even deadlier situation in the long term. And I just want to go back to one thing you were saying, Imam Mujahid, about what imams can do. You're asking, I think, very crucial. Imams are on the front lines of this. I know personally of imams, and I wish more imams would do this, not only speaking about domestic violence in khutbahs, but also counseling Muslim couples. Because for a lot of Muslim families who are either from overseas or they're converts and they don't have Muslim family, in the Quran, when there's a dispute between a husband and wife, God advises Muslim families, take one person from her side, the wife's side, one person from the husband's side, and try to resolve the issue. The imam and people who are qualified like counselors need to step in and do this, because this will help relieve the situation. It will help these families in crisis who are suffering from domestic abuse also, because they need somebody on their side to speak up. They can't speak up for themselves, the women and the children. So the imams and the men in the community specifically, but even the sisters who can help give support to the wife who is in distress, need to move forward and play that role that normally parents would do or other activists would do. So those are all very, very crucial, very important to keep in mind.
Is it possible for abusers to change?
Not without some intense counseling. They can't change. It's like any type of mental health issue. You need some help. And what I find, and I'm focusing on the Muslim community because that is where, I'm concerned humanitarian, but that's where my heart lies. But I don't find that there's that type of counseling, because it's going back to what you were saying, sister, that, that it was like a private affair, because I'm just not able to believe or accept that someone didn't know about what was happening in Sister Karima's home. So whoever it was that knew or that they went to for counseling, I won't say didn't do their job. Maybe they weren't qualified. And even as imams, they need to know what it is that is appropriate to say. And unless and until that Imam can say to someone who's coming as a victim of domestic violence, can say, you know what, let me get you to a safe place while I work with this brother, then you know what, we're going to continually have incidents such as the one with Sister Karima. And the first case that I even remember being so horrific was, of course, Asia Zubair, you know, in New York when her husband beheaded her. She had spoken to people, but someone, you know, gave her, you know, either bad advice or no one gave her, you know, proper advice. And that's where the error is. The other thing that I noticed too about with the brothers, when they're seeing a brother, they're not seeing this abusive man who's, you know, could do, you know, like from beat to even, you know, murder their wife. What they're seeing is the brother who prays beside them. That's their image. And so it's hard for, you're trying to put, the best construction on it, making all of these, the excuses. Meanwhile, he leaves from the masjid and he goes home and he beats his wife. And we need to be able to understand that the second cardinal rule is to believe the woman. If she says that she's being abused, believe her, even as you're trying to investigate it, as opposed to, well, no, that couldn't be my brother. I mean, he's praying here. I see him in the masjid. He's contributing. And so I don't think that it's as easy as, or as simple as if he can be changed, because you're talking about, especially cultural.
What would you advise people who know somebody is being abused? What can they do? I mean, friends, relatives, neighbors, if they know or suspect an abusive relationship, do they have some responsibility? Moral responsibility as well as legal responsibility?
I don't know. It looks like I've frozen. Okay. Yes. One of the things that I remember learning and going to become a chaplain is that they said you just be a listener, right? You being a listener, because they need someone that they can share the information with, and someone that they can trust. And in the beginning, that may be all that you can do. What I have, my new mantra that when I talk with individuals, because people will call me on behalf of someone. They will call me on behalf of someone. And they're thinking, okay, well, they don't know what they're doing. I'm trying to get them to do this. I'm trying to get them to do that. But what you cannot do is remove one form of oppressive behavior or conversation for another form of oppressive conversation. Because if she's not ready to leave, then all you can do is just listen to them. And you also, unfortunately, I tell people you have to respect her right to make a wrong decision in that moment, because you can't force her out. And what you could do is that you can cause her to go against you, because she feels as if you're trying to force her to make a decision that she's not ready to do. And the next thing, of course, is to say, well, there is a shelter. Let her know about what solutions are available. The solution that I dislike the most, and again, this has to do with having done this work, is when people say, oh, go and get a protective order. And the reason why I dislike it the most is because a protective order is a piece of paper. And if somebody is intent on beating you or, shooting you or whatever they're doing, it doesn't stop bullets. It doesn't stop a knife coming at you. It didn't stop, Asia from being murdered. She had a protective order. And it gives the women a false sense of security that if they have a protective order, then he's not going to hurt them. That's not true. What the protective order says is that if he comes and hurts you again, okay, so then we can do something. But in those two cases, it didn't really matter because they are both deceased. And that's what I want people to stop doing, putting so much emphasis on a protective order instead of getting her sister to safety. That is the most important thing that you can do. And everybody knows that's the cardinal rules. Is that as Muslims, we have a tendency to not utilize it.
Well, Chaplain Asma, you are living in a shelter yourself.
Yeah.
Why so?
The reason why is because when I first started doing this, and I went to, and it goes back to some of the things I said earlier, I went to the Muslim community and asked for help to establish a shelter for Muslim women victims of domestic violence. And no help or support was given because they said that it didn't exist. And that's what I mean when I say that, you know what, they don't change what they can tolerate or what they can choose to ignore. And so what I ended up having to do was to turn my house into an actual shelter, because I had my health center, and the women would come, the Muslim men who were abusive, they would bring the women, and this is part of my story, they would bring the women to the clinic because they wanted to be able to have them have an exam. And this was all these years ago. They want them to have an exam. And
exam of what?
Well, just, you know, like a female health exam. That's what they said they were bringing them for.
Oh, as you know, your role as a nurse.
Yes, because I'm a nurse practitioner, right? A female health nurse practitioner. So they would bring them because they said they wanted them to have a female health exam. I won't say their intentions were to make sure that they didn't do any, different kind of harm, but that's what they would bring them for. And so I would take the woman into the exam room, and the man would say, "I want to go back with her." And I was like, okay, I thought it was odd, but if she didn't say that he couldn't, then I had to let him come back. And so then I'm saying, okay, I started preparing for the exam, and then I guess he said, and any females, we know that this is not something anybody wants to just be seeing. And so then he decides that he's going to just go back up front and wait until I finish the exam. And what I share, this is how I learned of domestic violence in the Muslim community, is that now for the first time in this woman's adult life, she's alone with someone who she can trust, and she trusts me with this information. But it wasn't anything that I could do. All I could do was be a listener. So what I did at first is that I would make up diseases, and I tell people I would make up diseases so that he would have to bring her back. Putting a Band-Aid on it. I said, okay, she got monodiglycerized vaginosis encephalitis. Just made some terms, and the men didn't know, and then they would bring her back. And then I would put some other reason. They would keep bringing her back. And eventually I realized that I wasn't helping, that the only way that I could make a difference was to establish a shelter for Muslim women victims of domestic violence. And that's what I did. But I ended up having to give up everything that I had in order to do that, because the Muslim community, this is not a cause that they give to.
So you're not living in a shelter, but shelter is living in your own home.
Well, not living in a shelter. Well, what I did was trying to think of how to answer that one. So by turning my home into a shelter, so that yes, myself and the sisters are there. So yes, I turned it into the house itself into a shelter. So. But right
now that you have done it for a few years, is the support now has increased from the Muslim community?
No, and this is the part that, in fact, because of the COVID, the pandemic, and the other shelters were closed. So even the other shelters that women were going to, Muslim women may have been gone to, they're closed. So I've gotten, requests. I get requests from all across the United States, because it was the only shelter established in the United States that will accept someone nationwide, all right? Then they could stay there until such time as they become, self-sufficient with their children. So I tried to make it a home environment. And so people know about me, and I'm on the domestic violence hotline. So everybody will send the women. And I say, my joke is that they sent them, but they didn't send them with a check. So therefore, the Muslim community will trust me with the most vulnerable population, Muslim women and children, victims of domestic violence, but not with the finances to care for them. So once they send them, it's like they're out of sight and they're out of mind. And with COVID, I'm getting even more requests than ever. And I have, I say that I would rather, put a woman, even if it was just mats on the floor, because right now it's a home, where they live with, living room, dining room, kitchen, all those things. But I would rather, just overextend myself than to have someone like with the same end result fate of Sister Karima. And because I've recently had a family that has, sons, I actually had to give up my space. So right now I'm sleeping on the floor in someone else's place that I need to be able to leave. I'm not even have a space in my own shelter because I cannot get the financial support to have a whole nother home.
So we're reaching the conclusion of our program, Sister Chaplain Asma Hannif. You want to give out your website for people to contact you?
Well, yes, that would be so wonderful. The website is www.mnisashelter.org.
Spell that out.
Okay, MNISAA shelter.org. I would like to give, I don't mind, I would like to give my email address if that's okay, and which would just be chaplainasmahannif@gmail.com, because if someone contacts me by the .org ones, I can't read it because we don't really have internet and computer in the shelter like that. So if they wanted to if someone needs shelter, I don't want to give them a whole nother step to go to the website. They could just email directly, and that's chaplainasmahannif@gmail.com.
Well, thank you so much, Chaplain Asma Hannif and Samana Siddiqui, for being with us. This crime is called domestic, but it's nothing but a horrible type of violence. We need to grow up, we need to raise better children, and as a community, we need to realize that it is found in the Muslim community. The loving message of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, probably has not reached the people or their heart for them to become better human beings. That's why systems is there, processes are there, laws are there, but loving people who established a shelter and welcome people so they could be comforted and are safe is extremely needed in our community. Thank you, Dr. Abdul Wahid and Sherdil Khan, for producing today's show. You're watching Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and our own website, muslimnetwork.tv. Peace and salam.